Unexplained America.
Hello, this is Unexplained America, and I'm your host, Lisa. Thank you for joining me this week as we discuss more on Elvis Presley. This is going to be a part two of a two-part series. So if you haven't listened to part one, go back. In this episode, we're going to pick up where we left off, where Elvis died. So this is going to be 1966 to the present day. Okay, we're going to talk about all the unexplained that has happened since his passing. Now, a little business, please take a moment to leave a 5-star rating wherever you listen. Leave me a comment, follow, subscribe. All these items really help the podcast and are really appreciated. Also, go find me on all the social media platforms. Now, I'm plugging the live show again, which is located at the historic Ritz Theater in Malvern, Arkansas. And this is on Saturday, July 11th at 7 p.m. You can just show up at the door. We will have a way for you to pay cash, Cash App, or even a debit card, credit card. So you can get tickets ahead of time. So you could message me for a purchase link. But this is a live show where I'm going to be with my friends with cryptids across the Atlas, and they're going to be talking about local cryptids, and I am going to be covering the true crime case of Abe Tipton. Now, this is going to be a very sad but very interesting case, and we'll talk about the justice behind the case. Now, tickets are going to be $10 at the door. Okay, so just love to see you guys there. Now, we're going to get started again with part two, where we left off. Elvis had, collapsed in his home, and they pronounced him actually dead at the hospital. So we are picking up on that day in the hospital. By 4 p.m., they announced the horrible news to the outside world and all the people waiting there. There were thousands gathering at the hospital. And of course, the nurses, the doctors, the staff, they're devastated. Vernon is in shock and devastated. Lisa Marie, she has to call Priscilla. Everybody is in shock. Everybody is devastated. They do not understand how this could happen. This was a huge shock. Like, how? He had just been playing racquetball. Like, how did this happen? Now, right away, people are hearing about this. This is utter devastation. President Carter pays a tribute to Elvis, and he says Elvis Presley permanently changed the face of American popular culture. He had become a worldwide symbol of his country's vitality, rebelliousness, and good humor. The president went on to state Elvis was unique and irreplaceable. He states Elvis Presley's death deprives our country of a part of itself. His music and his personality, fusing the styles of white country and black rhythm and blues, permanently changed the face of American popular culture. Carter ended with Presley had burst upon the scene over 20 years ago with an impact that was unprecedented and will probably never be equaled. On top of these statements, obviously, numerous people are weighing in. Even Priscilla's dad is mentioning how, Elvis was doing. The last time he had seen Elvis was at Christmas, and he stated that he was fine. We met in a family atmosphere. He was jovial, happy. I had no idea that something like this would be happening so soon. He went on to say, Priscilla is really broken up. She's just heartbroken. There was still a closeness between the two that never changed. That was quite obvious to us. Now, on top of these items, Dr. Nick is weighing in. The doctors at the hospital, people are clamoring for information. They want to know what has happened. And there is a Dr. Jerry Francisco, which we'll talk about. He is the main pathologist. He is the medical examiner for Shelby County, where Memphis is located. But he stated, and this was literally the day after Elvis passed, but he stated that Elvis was using medication to control his blood pressure and for a colon problem, but there is no evidence of any chronic abuse of drugs whatsoever. So this was being stated There was at the time, so kind of going back a little bit, we talked about Elvis having this huge entourage. Well, in 1973, around the same time that he divorced Priscilla, he had about 3 bodyguards that Vernon got rid of, okay? He fired him. He said that he was kind of trimming the fat, quote unquote, but Elvis just didn't trust these guys. And then they ended up coming out with a tell all book, even before Elvis passed, that really devastated Elvis, talking about Elvis's drug use. And I believe, and I have not read the book myself or anything, but in the book, they outlined how bad his drug abuse was, but they actually kind of alleged or didn't really say, but it's almost like they were alleging that he was doing hard street drugs, okay, which there was no any indications of that whatsoever, but a lot of people felt that was happening and it was alluded to and it was alleged. So just FYI, because that will come up again. And like I said, Dr. Nick weighs in. If Elvis had been taking cocaine, I would have known about it. So again, a lot of people were alluding to different drugs, hard street drugs, so to speak, quote unquote. Okay. Now, the autopsy is performed right away on the same day. Okay. That same afternoon, they start the autopsy. So, Dr. Jerry Francisco, he has 5 other pathologists there at Baptist Hospital to conduct the autopsy with him, okay? Now, they state that Elvis died based on Ginger Alden's words that he had to have died sometime between 9 a.m. and 2:30 p.m. But obviously, they don't know for sure because that was the time frame that she gave that she didn't see him. But they stated his actual dying only took 4 minutes. Now, they state that he experienced coronary arrhythmia and irregular heartbeat, which they had announced this like whenever people were clamoring for answers. Obviously, they had actually stated he had died of a coronary arrhythmia or heart attack, like already. They had pronounced it even ahead of doing the autopsy, which a lot of people did not like. But obviously, they were feeling all types of pressure to say something, okay? But they do find that, yes, he experienced coronary arrhythmia, irregular heartbeat. Dr. Francisco said he could not see any drug usage as the cause or any foul play. Like he did look for any type of injection marks or any other clues to hard drugs like cocaine and such, but he did not find any of that. Now, Dr. Nick, he expressed that Elvis was on some diet pills, but they were not amphetamines, in that he did not believe Elvis was on hard drugs. And again, we talked about the ex bodyguards. They had written this tell all book that had come about. And so, again, a lot of people were assuming that that's what he was abusing. Now, Dr. Francisco did express that there was evidence or known evidence that Elvis had, obviously, the colon issues. He had mild hypertension. He did have blockage in his arteries. He was about 50% blocked in his arteries, okay? Now, they state that obviously the lab would continue to run all the items and evidence that could have affected Elvis's death, but obviously that was going to take some time. Now, they spend 2.5 hours. They finish his autopsy by 8 p.m. on the 16th. Wednesday, it is announced that Elvis will be brought to Graceland. The house is going to be open to the public for a memorial viewing. So around noon on Wednesday, which is the 17th, they move Elvis's body. They bring it in like a side entrance to Graceland. There are literally 50,000 to 100,000 people. They can't even gauge gathered outside the walls of Graceland because they had announced this. So this amount of people, guys, are going to actually see Elvis in the flesh and get to view him and go through Graceland. I mean, I can't even imagine that happening, but Vernon wanted to do that for the fans, okay? So they open the house up. This is for the first time ever at 3 p.m. And they literally have to shut down things by 6 p.m. because they had told people that they were only going to open it up from 3 to 5, but they did allow it to stay open till 6 p.m. and there were still thousands in line. But there were just so many people. They were in shock, they were in horror, they were grief-stricken. They just wanted to see Elvis one last time. Now, simultaneously, as you can imagine, Elvis's movies, his records, I mean, he has unprecedented purchasing going on with anything Elvis Presley. Compounding this horrible situation, in the early morning hours, there were 300 people who had gathered for like an overnight vigil at the gates of Graceland. Now, they literally witness a car plowing into the crowd. This car hits people, throws one person like over the car onto the hood, and then this driver drives off. Like he hits these people and he drives off. He doesn't even drive quickly. Like they end up being able to get him, and we'll talk about that. But two women are killed, a Juanita Joanna Johnson and Alice Marie Hovertair. Hovertair. I might be saying that wrong. Both of these women are 19 years old and both are from Louisiana. Now, another young girl, her name is Tammy Bader. She is injured super bad. She is taken to the hospital. She is also 19 and from Missouri. Now, again, the car that did this, it wasn't even like driving off quickly. It was clearly not in its right mind. The police end up chasing the car down. They arrest this individual, and this is an 18-year-old Treatise Wheeler. Now, he is charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder, driving while intoxicated, and leaving the scene of a crime. So it's like you already have this awfulness going on, and then you have 2 deaths. It's just absolutely horrific. Now, later that day, Elvis's family holds a private funeral in the music room for Elvis, and many celebrities are there. And when I say private, I don't mean small, but I mean private. There were several people there, but it was celebrities like Johnny Cash with his wife June, Sammy Davis Jr., James Brown, George Hamilton, and many, many, many more. There was just a huge procession of these white limousines that take Elvis's body and all of these famous people to his interment beside his precious mother Gladys at the Forest Hill Cemetery. So Gladys had actually been buried in the ground, but when Elvis's passed, they had a mausoleum constructed and they were going to move Gladys's body into the mausoleum with Elvis, okay? Now, literally 80,000 people or so line the way. Like they're lining Elvis Presley Boulevard all the way to the cemetery. This was global mourning, global shock, global disbelief. Like people just couldn't believe that Elvis could be gone. Like how? You know, he's only 42 years old, which happens to be, guys, like remember when his mom died? She died in August. She was 42 years old as well. Is that crazy? That's kind of crazy. Now, on August 20th, the newspaper reports that there are rumors circulating that Elvis had lupus. That I guess people are just assuming because of his intestinal issues and puffiness, like people are like, okay, did he have lupus? Now, the medical examiner, he states there were no grounds to this rumor, and they looked at that, and people are also speculating on, okay, what's going to happen to Graceland? People immediate, this is kind of immediate that people are wanting a museum. And then other people are weighing in, they don't want a museum. Vernon he finally talks to the newspaper. He was just beside himself. All he says about the situation is Graceland will remain in the family. That's all he says. Now, it is announced a few days later that the estate all goes to Lisa Marie. However, Vernon is trustee and executor, and then Minnie and Vernon are to live in Graceland to be taken care of until they pass, okay? And then everything, of course, goes to Lisa Marie. Now, there is a trust set up for Lisa Marie that in the event Vernon and Minnie pass, of course, everything goes to her, but she cannot have full control of her trust until she's 25. Now, in October, the autopsy is partially revealed. So when Elvis had passed, because it's not a criminal investigation, there's nothing that says that this autopsy has to be out there, okay? It's family. It's a family autopsy. It's a family matter. Now, Vernon, at the time of all this happening, he stated that he wanted to release the findings of the autopsy. Like he wanted to be, I guess, give the fans what they wanted or whatever, at least at that time. So this is like in August. Well, the autopsy isn't actually released, or anything is released, until October. Now, and it's dated October. Now, Vernon does not allow the full release. In fact, he states that he wants Elvis's full autopsy report sealed for 50 years. Okay, that was his final decision. Even though he had said that he would release it, he only released like a partial, which we're gonna talk about. Now, over the years, people will talk about autopsy and other things. This is nothing that was actually released to them. They are speculating, or some have actually, this is coming off of memory of some doctors or even those pathologists that were there, because there's other people who are there. But this is all from memory, and this is all that they have. But his full autopsy report will be 50 years old in 2027. So I will tell you guys now, as soon as I can get that full autopsy report, I will do a follow-up kind of short episode about that, because I do think that that will be very interesting. But I am going to go over what was actually released, okay? Now, there are several things on this report that are not mentioned, but it does have Elvis's name. It has his address. It's marked as white, male. He's 42. It reflects that the Shelby County Sheriff's Department and the Memphis Police Department were the investigating agencies. It does list that he was an entertainer, and it lists that he was found dead, and it says yes to rigor. Now, it says his eyes are blue, or at least it's marked BL, and then his hair is BL for black. It says that no facial hair, so there was nothing like a mustache or anything marked. His liver color is illegible, and I have not been able to find any notation of what that is. It looks like a G under liver, but some people state that it has to do with livor mortis. Okay, livor mortis, or what we also call postmortem lividity, is the purple or red discoloration of the skin that occurs when like blood is settling at the lowest points, like if someone's laying there, he was laying on the carpet or whatever. So that's what it states, and this is related to when the heart quits pumping and then the blood settles. And it has been said and released that his liver was diseased and enlarged, and his heart was enlarged and about double the normal size, a healthy heart. Now, it is marked that he is not circumcised, and I really did not want to know that. But it is interesting. Obviously, he was born in 1935. He was born at home, so he was not born in a hospital. So I don't know if that was the reason. It does say that circumcision was very common, but more, quote unquote, in the middle class or upper class, and I'm guessing maybe those born in a hospital. But Elvis would definitely have been lower class, and again, he was born at home. So I thought that was interesting. It's also noted that he had congestion to his face and upper torso, and the autopsy, it says by Baptist ME, like medical examiner. Now, there is a graph of the body reflected, and the words are marked as pressure mark and then sutured thoracotomy. Then it's stated probable cause of death HCVD with ASHD for hyperintensive cardiovascular disease with arteriosclerotic heart disease. Now, second page of the autopsy just discussed the time. It said dead on arrival, but resuscitation attempted. And it had Dr. Nick's info. It stated the person at the scene was Ginger Alden. And I will say, at first reports, it says that, I guess they were trying to hide the fact that she was there and found him, or to try to protect her. But A lot of first reports said Joe Esposito found him, or that he was in his dressing room. And then we do know that Ginger found him like in his bathroom. And again, it does say, and the second page of the report does say he was found in his dressing room, which again, we do know it was his bathroom, but it was like his bathroom kind of, I mean, it's all very huge, but he had this huge bathroom that went into like a huge dressing room slash closet slash bedroom, really. Now it says showed no foul play, and it stated he had felt okay and been playing racquetball that morning. The drugs listed, and eventually this drug list comes out, okay? There were 14 actual drugs, like prescription drugs listed, but there were primarily 10 that notated that meant anything, quote unquote. Now he had codeine, he had morphine in his system. He had methaqualone, which is a barbiturate. It's a quaalude. He had diazepam, and he had something called a desmethyldiazepam. And like basically, this diazepam is Valium, so it's used for anxiety, insomnia, just like this other desmethyldiazepam. There is a drug called efenamate, which was another sedative, and there's an ethloravinyl, also called Placidol. It was also used for treating insomnia, and this was more, I guess, popular. It said in the 1990s. I don't know. It's not something that people get now. Pentobarbital is another barbiturate. It has a sedative side effect. And a phenobarbital, kind of the same. It's going to treat anxiety, insomnia, and seizures. There's a butobarbital, so another barbiturate. So several, as you can see, several different barbiturates, but several different items that are treating insomnia and slash anxiety. Okay, so several. Now it said that none of these items were quote unquote above a therapeutic level. Okay, so what it's been described is that all of these items were in therapeutic levels. However, it was said that the codeine was like 3 times as much codeine as what would be quote unquote normal dose. But when you're talking about combining these, so it's like there couldn't be an overdose of one of these things. There wasn't enough of one of these things to overdose him, but it was polypharmacy, which meant that obviously there's a lot of drugs here that they could have fed off each other, and a lot of these drugs could have slowed down his breathing and obviously affected things. Now, it was also said basically that Elvis, the way that he wasn't on the toilet. A lot of things, it's like, oh, he died on the toilet. Well, he had gone to the toilet, certainly. And of course, well, I should say he didn't go to the toilet, which was part of his issue all along. But he had taken a good 2 to 4 steps. Like he was quite a ways from the toilet. But the way that he was found, and plus the fact that they said it only took him 4 minutes to die, was why there have been a numerous people, pathologists, forensic pathologists that have studied everything about Elvis, that have said that it was most definitely a heart attack and not a drug overdose. And the reason that they felt like it wasn't a quote unquote drug overdose was the fact that if it had been, they feel like he could have made it to the bedroom, that a drug overdose is not as quick a death as the heart attack. And the fact that he was only able to take a few steps before he was down showed them what really happened to him. Now, that doesn't mean that drugs weren't a factor in his death. Obviously, they were. So when they examined his colon, like his colon was huge. Of course, he was described as having this mega colon. He was impacted, so he couldn't use the bathroom. That was part of another reason why they felt like he had his heart attack. He was straining. He was straining to go. He was in pain. That would have been incredibly painful. And a lot of these drugs that he was taking, they cause constipation. Just this years and years, 20 years worth of all of these drugs. Basically, his colon had this chalk like clay like, it was described as clay like material filling his colon. So he was just in a horrible way, like absolutely horrible situation for Elvis. Between Elvis's obvious colon issues that he had suffered from, the fact that he was suffering in pain from the tooth situation, the fact that he couldn't sleep, it was also mentioned from medical reports that Elvis suffered from glaucoma. Now, I didn't know a lot about glaucoma. I've heard of it before, but basically it was an eye disorder or disease where it caused extreme pressure and pain in the eye and in the head. So he would have been in pain from all of these situations. So kind of bottom line, Elvis was struggling with pain and this was said to be the source. Obviously, some of this pain was actually caused, like we mentioned, from just the years of these prescription drugs. Now, again, we don't have the full report of the autopsy. Like, we don't know his height, his weight. It's been mentioned by people that he weighed about 260 at the time of his death. Obviously, we don't know, but it will be very interesting when the full autopsy report comes out. And whenever I see that and go through that, we'll have a follow up episode to that for sure. Kind of immediately after Elvis's death, there was a plan or talks of an Elvis museum. And this was by the city of Memphis, in fact, and they actually had their eyes. There were about 13 acres that sat across from Graceland. And obviously, as we know of today, this is where the Graceland Museum is, where you start the tour for Graceland, where the planes are situated. Obviously, the family is grieving, Vernon's grieving. There are so many grieving fans that are lining the gates of Graceland. And likewise, they are congregating at the cemetery where Elvis is buried, and there are throngs and throngs of people hanging out at his mausoleum. Now, on Saturday, August 29th, and this is 77, so very shortly after his death, they witness, and when I said they, we've got security. There are a lot of people there, and there have been like Memphis PD and such that are watching the cemetery. Now they witnessed some men scaling the back wall of the cemetery. So they kind of tip off Elvis's family. They tell Vernon what's going on, and they make sure that there's more police. So that overnight of that Saturday the 29th, they make a plan, the police do, to surveil the cemetery that night in the event that these people come back. And lo and behold, these three men do come back, and they are caught trying to break into Elvis's mausoleum. Now, three men are actually arrested, and the leader or kind of brains of the operation was a man named Raymond Green. Their plan, evidently, was to steal Elvis's body and then ransom, like kind of hold the body as a ransom, and they were going to ask for around $10 million for Elvis's body. They are arrested, that this is taken care of. But after this happened, so there's already been all of this horribleness just compounding. But after this occurrence, Vernon has his attorney go to the zoning department of Memphis and commission them to allow them, the family, to have Graceland rezoned and given permission to have 6 graves on site. And they would actually have 6 graves in this meditation garden. Now, kind of going back, the meditation garden, which is off of the pool area, if I'm remembering correctly, it was added and kind of constructed with the same architect and designer that designed the jungle room for Elvis. And so the meditation garden was never meant, obviously, to be a cemetery or anything. It was for Elvis to kind of have a peaceful place just to meditate. And of course, he liked to do his karate. And Vernon needs a safe place to keep Elvis and then keep Gladys. So they petition for the city. to rezone. It was costing Vernon about 200, or I should say the Elvis Trust, about 200 a day to secure the cemetery, plus this awful inconvenience of all those fans, the potential theft and destruction to the other grave. So really it was a detriment to the actual Forest Hill Cemetery as well for Elvis to be buried there. So on October 2nd, zoning commission does grant permission of this to happen, and immediately Gladys and Elvis's bodies are moved to where they exist today in the meditation garden. Now, it has been alleged, and of course a lot of things are alleged, which we'll get into. Elvis's body is not necessarily in the meditation garden or where it says that it is. Who knows what is true? I would think that, they had zoning. I would think it is, yes, where the marker is. There's no and it's not like anyone can break in to the situation. That was the point of moving Elvis and Gladys there. But it was alleged that by other people that came forward years later, that Vernon actually, in the middle of the night, had them bury Elvis like 75 feet away from where the meditation garden is, which that doesn't even really make sense. But there are all kinds of things alleged. But I would think that, yes, Elvis is exactly where his grave marker is. And of course, right beside Gladys. And we'll kind of get into the rest. So this is in October of 77. Now, just FYI, still living at Graceland is Grandma Minnie. And then you had Elvis's aunt, Delta, who's still there. That's Minnie's daughter, Vernon's sister. And then you have Vernon. So Vernon had actually separated from Dee. Remember, he was married to Dee Stanley. They actually separated in 1974. And so he had moved back to Graceland. They had a house. I think he just let Dee have it. I think that house was eventually sold. Now, at this time in 77, Vernon was actually dating a woman named Sandra Miller. And he had expressed that he did wish to marry Sandra. Evidently, she lived at Graceland with him. And then also, of course, we have Brother Vester that's working at Graceland. And this is Vernon's brother. And of course, Delta's there. So there are a lot of Presleys still at Graceland. And obviously, Priscilla's bringing Lisa Marie. Okay. So a lot of Presleys living on the estate. And so again, it doesn't make sense that they would even think that Vernon would think, okay, we've got to hide, quote unquote, Elvis's body. I just don't see that as being true. In October of 1978, Vernon goes into the hospital for his heart. And he had already had a heart attack back in 1975. I think we touched on that whenever we talked about the paramedics thought that they were going for Vernon whenever they got the 911 call. Now, Vernon also has diabetes, and at this point, he is 62. Okay. Now, the city of Memphis, they had actually been communicating with Vernon as early as 78, they were still talking about in 79, about purchasing Graceland and Elvis memorabilia. Again, the city of Memphis really wanted to have an Elvis museum. But in February of 79, Vernon kind of put those talks on hold. He just wasn't feeling good. He wasn't healthy. He was in and out of the hospital. He goes back into the hospital May 29th of 79, and he's having irregular heartbeats, and he had collapsed at Graceland. And then by June 26th, Vernon passes away. And it is stated in his death certificate is congenital heart failure. And that is obviously in line with all of the health struggles that he's had. Many, many fans are so upset that they're saddened about Vernon's passing. Even more fans are congregating, and they are also really worried about Graceland. So they are just very concerned. Now, Vernon has a private funeral there at Graceland, and he is buried along with Gladys and Elvis And again, fans are not really in attendance, but they are crowding the gates of Graceland. It is just a constant thing to have the fans at Graceland. Okay. Vernon, knowing that he was sick, he had, and obviously Lisa Marie in 1979 is only 11 years old. Okay. She's very far from the 25 years of age that was required for her to actually be in charge of her trust. So Vernon had been in charge. He was executor of the trust along with like a bank. Well, he names an accountant along with the bank and then Priscilla to be the executor of the estate. So now pretty much Priscilla, the bank, and then this accountant is in charge of the trust for Lisa Marie. But Lisa Marie owns it. And again, Minnie is still alive, guys. Minnie's alive and Delta is living in a home. So yes. And from what I could tell, just a little side note. So Vernon had mentioned that he wanted to marry this Sandra Miller. I believe she was a nurse that he had met. He was never, I guess, quote unquote, officially divorced from Dee. Now they separated in 74. He passed away in 79, but from what I could see, they were never divorced. And she would go by Dee Presley for kind of the rest of her life. And yes, so I thought that was interesting. We will talk for a brief moment on Colonel Parker. So Colonel Tom Parker had been with Elvis again from the very beginning. They really dive into Colonel Parker in the Elvis movie a lot, but there are multiple court battles going on with Colonel Parker, especially once Vernon is gone and Priscilla is in charge. And basically, Colonel Parker had been getting 50% of the cut of Elvis's earnings. Okay. The trust is very upset. At first, the trust had allowed Colonel Parker to kind of continue to handle certain business things of Elvis's name. Well, then the trust was like, no, you are taking advantage. You're getting too big of the cut. The trust was very concerned about this. I mean, the contract between Colonel Parker and Elvis was done, as far as they could see. I mean, Elvis is passed and now this is his trust and this is for Lisa Marie. So they end up battling it out in court, and they do eventually settle outside of court and releasing Colonel Parker from any management of anything Elvis. Okay, it's done. Now, just a kind of little side note, Colonel Parker ends up working for the casinos in Las Vegas. I believe it's the Aladdin Hotel Casino that he was in with, but he works for them until his death. And he passes away in 1997. And at the time of his death, it's reported that he has maybe like $1 million to his name. But it is reported that he made via Elvis $270 million or so. And he had squandered all of that almost. So much of this money to Las Vegas and casinos. Like basically he was earned his part, $270 million. That is absolutely crazy. Now, we're going to briefly talk about Dr. Nick. So in 1980, of course, after Elvis passes away, he passes in 77, evidently, and Dr. Nick was Elvis's private doctor. He had been with Elvis for a long time. Evidently, he had initially met Elvis because Elvis was riding horses and kind of needed some help. He had some issues and pain from actually riding horses, but they get together and he works with him for 11 years. Okay. So the last 11 years of Elvis's life, Dr. Nick is his personal private doctor. Well, after all this comes through, of course, there's a lot of scrutiny on Dr. Nick, and Dr. Nick had evidently not just been Elvis's doctor, but he was also like Jerry Lee Lewis's doctor. And so in 1980, Dr. Nick is actually indicted on 11 counts, and this is in criminal court. Okay. He has 11 counts. He had, it said, other than Elvis, 8 other patients. Again, one was Jerry Lee Lewis, the famous Jerry Lee Lewis. Now, it said that the charges were he was prescribing excessive quantities of narcotics, sedatives, and amphetamines for Elvis and these other patients. Now, he goes to trial in October of 1981. So it took a minute to do that. Well, he is actually acquitted on these charges, and his attorney just described him as a good Samaritan who struggled in vain to cure the rock and roll star's drug addiction. So he was cited as perpetuating these drug addictions, but in his defense, he said that he was trying. He basically stated that he only took on these patients and told them, like, kind of the contract with me is that you don't get any drugs from anywhere else. Like, I'm going to try to wean you off of being addicted to drugs, so to speak. Now, that was the premise. So the jury listened to both sides, and after a 3-hour deliberation, do find him innocent of this. So he is acquitted on these criminal charges. That doesn't end there for him. Now, he does go on. He is still practicing. The actual Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners, they actually had found him guilty of overprescription, but they decided that he wasn't unethical, but they do impose in 1980 a 3-month suspension of his medical license and then 3 years probation. And this again is 80, and then he's acquitted in 81. Now in 1993, his license is actually permanently revoked. The Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners brand him, quote unquote, Dr. Feelgood, and the press are all over this. But it was revealed and documented that he had been overprescribing to numerous patients over many, many years. His defense was that his patients suffered from inoperable chronic pain, and he was just doing what was necessary to help these people. He quote unquote stated, I care too much. So that was, again, his defense. And he had tons of support. Dr. Nick had tons of family and friends support. They raised money and held benefits to pay for his court costs. And then obviously, he lost his medical license. It is said that afterwards, he couldn't practice. And so it looks like he had worked for FedEx, looking at insurance claims and different things. Like, he had to work in other areas. Now, he actually continued to live in Memphis for the rest of his life, and he actually did not pass away until 2016 at the age of 88. So that's kind of the little tidbits and sidebar on Dr. Nick. On May 8th of 1980, Minnie, who had been in bad health for several years at this point, she passes away from heart failure. However, unlike Elvis, unlike Vernon, she had lived a very long life. She was 89 years old. She outlived them all, okay? Now, she was buried. She had a private ceremony. She was also buried alongside Elvis, Gladys, and Vernon in the meditation garden. Aunt Delta is still alive, and she will live in Graceland. Like, her rooms were kind of in the back quarters. I would say there's like a whole living quarter area off of that, I would say, to the north of the kitchen, if you've been on the tour. So her quarters were in that area. We'll kind of talk about that because she'll be living there at Graceland until her passing, which is not until 1993. So another 13 years after Minnie goes. Priscilla obviously is in control, in part, I should say, jointly in control of Graceland. With any large situation, you have cost with Graceland, taxes, insurance, upkeep. It's very important to try to keep Graceland for Lisa Marie. That was very important to Priscilla. Again, Vernon had said that Graceland was going to stay in the family. And then, of course, the city of Memphis is trying to buy Graceland before Vernon dies. So they had to come up with some type of money generation to protect Graceland and to protect Lisa Marie's assets, okay, that were left to her by her father and were very important. And luckily, very important to Priscilla. Priscilla begins in 1981 working on a plan to open Graceland to the public. So she actually, in 1982, announces Graceland will be opened. And of course, the ownership is kept in the family. And she even mentions that one day perhaps Lisa Marie will actually live in Graceland. But she announces that Graceland will open to the public Monday, June 7th of 1982. The price of tickets are going to be $5 for adults, $3 for children. She mentions that they have removed all the garish red and black and furnishing. So after she had left Graceland, Elvis had redecorated with the help of his girlfriend Linda, and they had made everything. In fact, in pictures, you can still see Elvis's bathroom, and his master bedroom was really dark. It was black and reds and some golds, but it was really dark and just really garish, really, yeah, just didn't look great. And so they did take away all that on the lower level, and they took it back to the prettier, quote unquote, blue, whites, and golds that had been present in the house more in the 60s. Okay, so they took it back to that. Elvis had liked that look better, so to speak, although who knows, but that's what she said. So she was like, we took this away, we took it back to this blue, which is there today, it just fits and it looks really great. The tour announced of what will be seen is you'll see the ground floor of the home, you're going to see the basement, and then when you go outside, you're going to see Gladys's pink Cadillac, and then other items. You can see the pool, you can see different things. It's unclear if at that point that they were allowing people to see the racket courts. I will say, when Elvis lived at Graceland, he had people in his house all the time, like all the time. And it was said that nobody could come up to the second floor, period. Whenever he was home, that was his sanctuary. Everybody could be all over his house. He was very open, very giving. But his second floor, where his bedroom and office were, and then, of course, eventually Lisa Marie's, when she was born, Lisa Marie's room, and before that, Minnie's bedroom. But you couldn't go upstairs. That just was never a thing. And then, obviously, he died upstairs. Now, I did talk to, this was a driver. So I just actually went to and stayed at the guest house at Graceland because we went for a concert, which I love Graceland. I've been through several times, but the driver had mentioned in the 80s when he had seen the house at that point during, I guess it would have been the 80s at some point. He said that at that point you could go upstairs, like the tour included the upstairs. And then he stated that like things were missing or people were taking advantage of that. And so then they closed it down. I don't know what's true. I know obviously when it first opened, the upstairs was not included. They may have added that and then realized that was a mistake, or realized Elvis wouldn't like that, or maybe it just turned into a different, maybe macabre situation because he did die in the house. They shut that down, and they even say to this day, like even when George W. Bush, he had met one of the presidents of one of the countries that loved Elvis. He went and did the tour, and they wouldn't even let them upstairs. It is shut down from going upstairs, and like I said, that was something that Elvis required when he was living. So obviously you can go online and you can see pictures, so I do think it's probably, I don't think that this driver man was lying by any means. I really probably think that there was probably a minute in time when they were allowing people upstairs and they realized, okay, this is a mistake. But there are definitely pictures of the upstairs online. So it's interesting to see. And obviously I would love to go upstairs just to see it. Just to see it would be so cool. But I do respect and understand the decision not to open that up. But man, it's just such a cool place. Just such a fun situation. 1982, from that point forward, Graceland is operating as a museum and generating money, and Priscilla is in charge of that situation. Now, moving kind of backwards. This is a little bit backwards. Even when Elvis was living, there were Elvis impersonators. There were people that were dressing up as Elvis, and they were performing, and they were making a living as being an Elvis impersonator. And now there is an article literally in July of 1978 that talks about a man named Dennis Wise. Dennis had been a car salesman and such. He was musically inclined. He did kind of look like Elvis. And so he was kind of an Elvis lookalike. He goes ahead about early 78. He has plastic surgery on his face to make himself look even more like Elvis. Like he literally becomes an Elvis lookalike. And he is 25 years old at this point, and he has this plastic surgery and he has the whole deal. I will post this picture. Yeah, he looks very much like him. After he does this, he is booking, and he lived in Hawaii, by the way. He was booking $10,000 a week in nightclubs, doing shows as Elvis. He had television appearances. Like, he is making his living as an Elvis impersonator. And again, his name is Dennis. He said he had zero regrets about his plastic surgery to be more like the king. Likewise, right after Elvis passed away, this was like in December of 77, there was a man, he was in Kansas. He was in prison, actually, at Fort Leavenworth, and his name was Johnny Arms. He is kind of outlining he's going to be getting out of prison soon. So he wanted to kind of change his future. So he actually at that point petitioned the court for them to allow him to change his name. Like, he wanted to legally change his name to Elvis Presley and not be Elvis Aaron Presley. Like, he wasn't going to go that far. He was going to be Elvis R. Presley, I guess, keep his middle name. And his quote unquote want to do this was because he wanted to carry on this famous name so that it would never be forgotten. Like, evidently he was a huge Elvis fan, but he wanted to preserve Elvis's name. And he stated, quote unquote, in his petition, he would be Elvis R, as in you are a star. Yes, so this was his plan. And it said there's probably millions, and it said there are millions, but documented about 80,000 or 85,000 Elvis impersonators. I mean, people living and making their money as Elvis between also very early around this time period. So this is all right after Elvis passes. There is a woman named Gail Brewer Giorgio that comes forward. She actually publishes a book in 1978 called Orion. And then she'll subsequently 6 more books, all related to Elvis. But basically, in this Orion, this was and I have not read it, but this was a fictional account of a star faked his own death so he could kind of get out of the spotlight. Okay, so but her book very much, even though being fictional, looked and acted like it was Elvis that they were talking about. And then there was even kind of corresponding with this, there was a man named Jimmy Ellis who was impersonating Elvis, and he was actually kind of working in conjunction, it said, with Gail, but he was releasing music as Orion and impersonating Elvis, sounding like Elvis. They were kind of doing this hyped up deal and making money off of these releases, and then questioning, okay, is Orion, kind of being like, kind of starting a stir, like, is Orion Elvis? And so basically bringing up a huge question for the public. Okay, is Elvis really dead? I mean, this book is alleging that he didn't, although it's fictional. And then there's this Orion who sounds very much like Elvis, is releasing music. So this situation brings up a lot of questions about Elvis being alive still. Okay, so that's kind of the deal that's coming about. So Elvis is still not able to rest in death. Okay, people very much are not letting him go, and they're making money off of these ventures, okay? Now, in 1979, we're going to talk about Geraldo. Geraldo Rivera, if you don't know who that is because you're too young, look him up. He had like a talk show. He was very famous. He had a lot going on. But in 1979, Geraldo has a special. It's a 2-part TV program, and it's called The Elvis Cover-Up. This comes out, and it's not supposed to be about questioning whether Elvis is alive or dead. That's not the purpose. It was actually questioning if his death was really covered up. Like, was it really a drug overdose? That was really the questions that were being asked and discussed, okay, in that special. But all that it did, especially the names, the Elvis cover-up, all it did was spawn even more questions about Elvis's living on. Like, did he fake his death? Is he still alive? Where is Elvis? So many people were believing that Elvis was still alive, and this perpetuated that, even though it did not, quote unquote, mean to. This is 79, kind of fast forward, and in between this time period, there are tons of, you have those tabloid, Globe, and the Inquirer, and just different ones, and they are constantly posting Elvis stories, and also Elvis sightings. So they're talking about, okay, is Elvis alive? Is he dead? This is a constant from the go. And then some of the stories aren't necessarily questioning his alive or dead thing. It's questioning, like I mentioned, where is Elvis really buried? They don't believe that he's really buried where in the meditation garden. Like, other things are talking about if Elvis has a love child or not. So I do have 2 articles with me, but this one was the Midnight Globe. Actually, Amber gave it to me because for some reason she is a hoarder. No, I'm just kidding. But she gave me this. This was from August 7th of 1979. This is the physical paper, by the way, guys. It's really cool. But in this story, they were talking about where is Elvis's grave hidden. And then this was also an anniversary edition. Okay, it was a tribute. So there were tons of articles in this Midnight Globe about Elvis, just because it was 2 years since his passing. Now I have another, and it's the National Enquirer, and this one was from June of 79. In this one, it shows pictures of Elvis, and it's discussing a possible love child, and shows a picture of Elvis, a picture of Elvis as a 2-year-old, and then it shows another boy, and it says, is this Elvis's grandson? So some people had come forward. There was a woman named Candy Jo Fuller who swears that she was the illegitimate daughter, and that her son Michael is Elvis's grandchild. So you had a lot of that going in, not just, okay, is Elvis alive or not? Now, between 1979, when this Geraldo special aired, and then all the way to, let's just say, 1986, 1987, there were numerous reports of Elvis sightings, numerous items that speculated or discussed that he had not actually died, that it was a conspiracy, he had faked his death. So that was going on kind of here and there, but nothing substantial, until it's reported really heavily in 1988 towards the end, and then 1989. So a 51-year-old woman named Louise Welling, she comes about in around March of 1988, stating that she witnessed Elvis numerous times in 1987. Now, Louise lives in Vicksburg, Michigan. And according to Louise, in September of 1987, after she had attended church service, she goes to her local grocery store called Felpausch's. I'm probably saying that horribly wrong, but Felposh. So this is a grocery store. Vicksburg is a very tiny town. At that point, maybe 2,000 people live there, okay? Just a very tiny town in Michigan. Now, she states she's in the grocery store, and then she goes to check out, and there weren't very many people there. But as she's checking out, she sees a man that is clearly Elvis, and she says it is Elvis, being checked out at the grocery store. And she says that he's wearing a white motorcycle outfit and that he's carrying a helmet. Now, she stated that this white jumper was not like a polished jumper. It wasn't like one of his jumpers like that he performed in, but it was just like a ratty tatty motorcycle onesie, okay? She says that she sees him. He's there in this grocery store. She doesn't say anything to anyone. And Louise will tell people later that she was a huge Elvis fan in her youth, that she, when she kind of forgot about him, she got married, had kids or whatever. But she would say that she had attended a concert when she was 15 in Detroit. No one could really back that up or whatever, but this is what she would tell people. And fast forward, she says after she sees Elvis in Vicksburg at the grocery store, then she says that she sees him 3 times in Kalamazoo, Michigan, which Kalamazoo is the bigger city to Vicksburg. It's like 12 miles away, but just has a lot more stuff, okay? Obviously, Vicksburg is very small. So she states that her and her daughter, one of her kids, she has like 5 children, one of her daughters is with her at a Burger King. They see Elvis at the Burger King in Kalamazoo. Now, this, of course, will be national news eventually. So this is the big story that will come out. But she states that she also saw Elvis at a mall, and then she saw him driving around in a quote unquote red Ferrari also. So she saw him 3 different times in Kalamazoo after that sighting at the grocery store in September. She also states that, and she kind of babysat on the side. She kind of worked in the home. She was a housewife, but she did some babysitting. And then she says one day when she was babysitting, she had a police scanner on, and she swears that she heard them say something on the scanner like, "Elvis, are you out there?" something. And then Elvis responded, "Yes, I'll be there in a moment." Yes. So she hears this going on. Well, she doesn't say anything until March of 1988. So then she goes to her local Vicksburg newspaper, or Kalamazoo. It was a very local paper, and they don't give it the time of day. They will not run her story. It starts getting around, and people are just making fun of her. They are giving her a hard time there in Vicksburg. Well, by the end of 88, this story, she goes on to actually talk to authors that have written other books other than Gail, because there were more authors that were coming about other than the Gail Brewer Giorgio that were writing similar books about Elvis not being dead. But she reaches out to them. She's reaching out to people. So she is reaching out to the media in 88. And eventually the story is growing. And of course, the big headline is like, "Elvis at Burger King in Kalamazoo." Like, that's the headline. So she ends up going. In fact, the New York Times runs a story. So many people pick it up from there, but she ends up going on like Larry King, if you know what that is. She goes on different talk shows. I think she went on like Oprah. I mean, this is becoming national news, and this really drives the whole Elvis sightings, the Elvis not being dead. The whole thing just lights up even bigger. And in Vicksburg, it kind of puts Vicksburg on the map for being the place where all these Elvis sightings is. And Louise will actually go on to say that she felt like Elvis was living in the Columbia Hotel in Vicksburg. Just a lot of different things, but a lot of people really talked highly of Louise. Like, they didn't think that people that knew her didn't think she was crazy or any stupid or anything like that. In fact, they thought she was a very nice woman, a very smart woman, but definitely had been a huge Elvis fan. But bottom line is, a lot of them did not believe her. But of course, on the national stage, it is huge news. And so this is really big in 89, which spurs another Geraldo special. Okay, so this time it is actually him questioning Elvis' death. In fact, it's called Elvis Dead or Alive. And he actually he comes out. In fact, I've watched the program. You can watch the program on YouTube, and I will try to post that in my notes or whatever. He comes out dressed as Elvis and such, and he does have multiple people on his show. It's really fascinating, and really his take is clearly of, "This is ridiculous," but he actually has Gail Brewer Giorgio on his show. He also has Joe Esposito, Elvis's longtime, road manager that was there the night he died, and he has Dee Presley. So he has some people on the show, on the program that he's talking to that obviously are in two different camps of thoughts. And then there's like another man there that's kind of like with the gal about, he doesn't agree with about the situation, but he definitely believes that Elvis is alive, so to speak. Geraldo's kind of take is clearly that Gail is wrong in that Elvis is truly dead. You do have it, yeah, he's making kind of fun of Gail and fun of the other people that are talking about the Elvis sightings. Like, that wasn't real. And there's even people like that he brings up to surprise and be like, well, they pretended to be Elvis for you. And because Gail was adamant about having like a recording of Elvis and all these things, and then this guy in the audience was like, no, I did that for you. You paid, so and so paid me to do this, and I didn't even know that. I thought this was like a fake thing, and then you used it as like a real thing. Anyway, so they're kind of showing her to be a fraudster, because really her whole career is writing books. And like I said, she wrote like 5 or 6 books about Elvis after he died, and the majority being he faked his death, and so on. This was kind of a dig at the conspiracy theories and then the conspirators. But in Vicksburg, it is interesting. So like I said, it put Vicksburg on the map. This Louise Welling, I mean, we're talking years and years of her being on the map, Elvis sightings in the newspapers or whatever. But they also, at that time, there's like a Skip Knowles who he was like a car salesman there in Vicksburg, but he was a businessman. He lived there. So he started at that point, not in conjunction with Louise, kind of like didn't he, in fact, he called her quote unquote different, but he starts an Elvis lookalike contest, which I don't know if they still do, but then he started in 1988 as his first one and kept going. So anyway, it was a big to do for Vicksburg, for Kalamazoo. The sightings definitely did not end with Louise Welling. In fact, it seemed to just grow from there. And I can say from my own experience, I remember going to the grocery stores or going to Walmart or whatever, and you always had like the tabloids. And I remember being a kid, and I would have been 10 years old in 1990, but I remember like late 80s, early 90s, definitely something almost always about Elvis on those tabloids. In fact, the weekly, like those type of national inquiries, or like the weekly updates, or the Weekly Globe, tabloid magazines, they ran articles all the time about Elvis. And it was always, Elvis living in Vegas, or Elvis hidden, all of these I tremendously remember and thought, oh, is Elvis really alive? People thought that he did that to kind of spur his career. That was kind of what they thought, that it was just him wanting to get away or him wanting to spark his career. Also, in 1989, after all of this is coming out, there is a non-profit organization that is founded. It's founded in April of 1989, and it is out of Ottawa, Canada, and it is called the Elvis Sighting Society. So it is actually founded in 89. Now, it looks like they actually incorporated in 1999, but then they actually dissolved their corporation. And I don't know if they're still just running without the actual corporate in or whatever. I don't know. But they dissolved it actually as of September of 2024. So literally just a couple years ago, it was still incorporated, and again out of Canada. But basically, this society, it was a nonprofit, allegedly started kind of as a tongue-in-cheek situation, but definitely people that had Elvis sightings or wanted to talk about Elvis sightings, they were always asking for people to provide them with Elvis sightings. So again, all this is sparking big in 89, and again, this society was existing and going on until 2024. Kind of fast forward from 89, in 1999, there are reports of an Elvis sighting, and this came from Canada, and it was January of 1999, and it stated that Elvis was at a counter at a Hardee's, like a Hardee's restaurant. And it was Elvis. Now, there were also more sightings of Elvis at laundromats, 7-Elevens, Walmarts, like never anywhere fancy. And they did note this. They wrote this article, but they also stated that there was a huge Elvis sighting in Oslo, Norway. Now, it said that he was going by the name Sylve, and this was a woman that I guess waited on Elvis in Norway. He was at this supermarket in the checkout line, and she takes his credit card. It says Sylve on it. That's all she would say, of course. She said that he was wearing a polyester suit with flared trousers, and she was adamant that it was him and that he goes by the Sylve and he lives in Oslo. And this was March 20th of the year 2000. As you can see, still, this was late 1999 and then 2000 that these sightings were persisting. And by this time, Elvis would have only been 65 years old at that time. I will say in that Oslo, Norway, they did say that he looked like the Elvis of old. So he definitely didn't look like the 40-year-old Elvis. He looked more like the 20 to 30-year-old Elvis, like the young Elvis. Now, numerous articles are continually going out between 2000, 2010 about Elvis sightings, and typically they are kind of tongue-in-cheek saying, oh, I saw Elvis, he's working at the mini mart. And what that truly was, we mentioned that there were 85,000 Elvis impersonators throughout the country. And so there were many people that they weren't even touring, they weren't even trying to have a career, but there were many that were, but just living their daily life as an Elvis lookalike, like doing their hair, wearing similar clothes, but literally articles just about seeing just men, Elvis people, and they would say their name is Joe or Tom or whatever their real name was. So many quote unquote sightings were just people that wanted to look like Elvis, that they kind of looked a little bit like him, but then they actually dressed like him, did their hair. He was just that much of a presence. And again, 85,000. And then there were multiple men, and still are to this day, making a living as Elvis, impersonating, performing. In 2006, there is a performer named Donnie Edwards, and he performed as Elvis. He was making a career. He was traveling to different theaters, and he was just paying homage to Elvis's iconic career. And just people loved to see even him. He was playing in 2006. He was playing at the Texas Opry Theater and selling out. His ticket sales were $25 to $30 per ticket. And I know myself, if you've ever been to Branson, you've been to the Legends, they always have an Elvis impersonator, just like they also have Madonna, Garth Brooks, Michael Jackson, those type of celebrities impersonators. But, many of this 85,000 are making and living a career as Elvis. Now, over the years, there were definitely some quote unquote weird, other than the Burger King Elvis sighting, but weird Elvis sightings. People would say that right away they would take pictures when they were at Graceland, and one picture, this guy was like, he states he got a picture of Elvis's face. I don't know if you can call that a sighting, or maybe I don't know if he wanted to think it was paranormal, but he says this man's name was Mike Joseph. He was visiting Graceland with his family, and he says that this photo was taken in 1977, but that couldn't be accurate. Nobody was on Graceland unless you lived there at this point, so that wouldn't have been accurate. Maybe after 1982 he took it, but he states the picture came from 1977 after Elvis had passed, and that it captured Elvis's face in like a reflection, which it was like a door that led to the pool area. Now, another kind of weird Elvis sighting was that people stated that in the movie Home Alone, which that was like filmed, I think it was released in 90, so it may have been filmed in 89, that Elvis is in the airport. Like there's a man that looks like Elvis that's in a background shot at the airport scene in Home Alone. So now I'm going to have to look for this and I will post this, but they swear that Elvis is in Home Alone as an extra. So that was another kind of weird one. There was also someone that states that they spotted Elvis on, like, at the gates of Graceland in 2017, about the time that it would have been like Elvis's 82nd birthday. Now, this man kind of looks like a Santa Claus. He has white hair, white beard. He's wearing a black jacket and matching black hat. But they state that he very much looks like Elvis. And I will say, that reminds me. So, in one of the documentaries, of course, we don't have the full autopsy report, but there have been numerous different pathologists and different people that have come out based on information that they saw during the autopsy or during the investigation of Elvis's body. But one stated that Elvis's hair, so basically we talked about he had been dyeing his hair for a long time, that his hair was fair. He was fair haired. Now, he had, at the time of his death, the first, he said, quarter inch of Elvis's hair all over his head was pure white. It wasn't dark. Of course, he was dyeing his hair until he passed. One of two things typically can turn your hair that white at such a young age, because again, Elvis was only 42. It says that stress or just genetics, which even genetically they thought, okay, you would have salt and pepper going on, but by the time you're 42, you probably wouldn't be white-headed. Even if you look at people like Steve Martin or whatever, he wasn't just white-headed at 40, although he was very gray, but Elvis would have had white hair, and they said that that was probably a combination of genetics and stress that caused him to go full white hair at such an early age. Now, we don't really know. And we don't really know what Elvis would have done with that for the rest of his life. But I have a feeling he probably would have dyed it the rest of his life. But that was kind of a weird, quote unquote, sighting, was this man in 2017. Now, there was another picture captured by people at Graceland that they said there was a groundskeeper at Graceland that looked like Elvis. And this was in 2016 that they caught this picture. And it's just, again, kind of similar to the other guy, just a man with white hair. Just looks like any average white-headed, white-bearded man. I guess they all look the same to these people. But anyway, now it felt like the Elvis sightings to me died down, or maybe I didn't notice them. Of course, like I said, when I was a kid, it seemed like there were Elvis sightings all the time. And again, the biggest one coming out from Louise in 87, it has been continuous. So in 2019, and I think they reported this actually in 2021, but the Weekly World News, again, one of these tabloid type magazines, and now they're online and such, but they reported that someone had taken a picture, and this was a tourist, and they were at Graceland, and this picture is hilarious, by the way. I will post this, but it was taken November 4th of 2019, and it shows a man, and it's like, it's so AI'd before AI, but it's just crazy looking. But it shows a man in a wheelchair being pushed. That is supposedly Elvis on his 85th birthday. Okay, so this, and he would have been in 2020, he would have been 85 years old. And so they still are at that point. And this picture is absolutely crazy. It is so morphed. It's clearly like someone tried to make this person look like Elvis and popped on his Elvis. It's just absolutely crazy. But this was reported as a true story, literally, again, reported in July of 2021. And then this picture was taken in 2019. This is ongoing. Elvis is still being seen, still being reported as quote unquote alive. And I didn't even realize this was still an ongoing thing. Again, I just thought, okay, well, in the 80s and 90s. So my question is, why? Why did people believe that? I mean, clearly the family did this kind of amazing thing. Vernon really did this amazing thing in 1977 when he allowed over 100,000 fans and mourners to walk through Elvis's music room and literally see his body. Over 100,000 people. There's no question that he died. But for some reason, so many people just couldn't let it go. Again, they thought the reasoning that he faked his death was so that because his career was failing or he wanted to just get out, he was tired of, having that fame. Of course, I get that ideology, but I really truly in my heart believe people just loved him so much, and he was just such this bigger than life icon and died so young that they just couldn't let it go. I mean, they just could not believe it. They didn't want to believe it. They wanted to turn away and be like, no, it just can't be true. He's just bigger than life. But I don't know. But so many people have made money off of his death, have, made careers out of being him. But it's just absolutely fascinating to me that this man, this icon of a man, just couldn't even be left alone in death. It's like people wanted a piece of him when he was alive, and he couldn't even get peace in death. Actually, it created an even bigger icon, honestly. And again, he's a super big icon. We're going to revert back really quickly to talking about we talked about all of Elvis's family and everyone that of course is buried. And of course, Lisa Marie, she even after she turned 25, she still allowed Priscilla to be the executor of her estate. Okay, so she never really took front row seat for anything at Graceland. Of course, she had full access. She was the benefactress, all these things, but she still let Priscilla kind of be in the seat, okay, in the driver's seat. She was fine with that. That's how it was. And of course, the decisions made, about Graceland by Priscilla, think about it, in 1982, just grew even more. And of course, now it is just this amazing museum and tribute and legacy to Elvis. And like I said, I've been through numerous times. People, I mean, I think they said they get 10,000 or more people going through daily. And when you go, I will say, there are many people from other countries. The bulk of the people going through Graceland, whenever I've been through, have definitely not been even American. They have come from all over, all the countries, all the states. It is just amazing. And you can now, I can't remember when they built it. I'll have to look at that. Maybe like 2018, 2017, they built the guest house at Graceland, which is a companion resort to Graceland. Like you can stay there. It's gated. It is fabulously Elvis. Touched on this already, but I've stayed there numerous times. El had dance events there. And it's just so beautifully done. It is contemporary, yet very Elvis, very Graceland. There's purple, there's the EP, there's his emblem of the TCB and the lightning bolt, taking care of business lightning fast, was like his saying. So that is incorporated. We've talked about Elvis's love. He had a love of food, and he had cooks and people that were always preparing him stuff. And everybody's always discussed that he loved peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. He would put bananas on them. He would put bacon on them. I mean, he would get crazy with these peanut butter sandwiches. Huge peanut butter sandwich fan. So when you stay at the guest house, I believe they do it around 9 p.m. It has changed at various times, and I've only been able to catch it like maybe once. But basically, I think then it was 10 p.m. But whatever time it is, if you go there, you check in, you can find out the time, but you stand in line at 9 p.m., 10 p.m., and they will serve you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. They make it for you. They have all these milks, different milks. You can get the peanut butter with like different variations if you want jelly, if you don't. Elle likes a peanut butter straight sandwich. I'm like, what? I think Elvis would roll over that. But anyway, And my daughter, I'll have to tell a story about her because and she's been going there, I wanna say, for a long time, probably so it's probably built in, like, 2018 or so at least, if not beforehand, but she her she's Elle Ponson, EP, so she loved Elvis, loved Graceland, loved everything saying EP. She's like, "Oh, EP," and when she went through Graceland, everything that was EP he has, like, an EP in his racquetball court. Anyway, it's just fun because we just love the whole Elvis thing. Priscilla really facilitated this, and Lisa Marie, she had struggles, which we'll talk briefly on. We're not gonna get too deep into this, but she let Priscilla have control. So in Lisa Marie's life, and Priscilla had a acting career. Lisa Marie also dabbled in like singer-songwriter, just trying to find her place in the world other than just, I'm sure, being Elvis's beloved daughter. And over her adulthood, she was scrutinized. She was always in the press. She had the short marriage to Michael Jackson. She was with Nicolas Cage. She kind of had these celebrity relationships. In 1988, she marries a musician named Danny Keough. They're married, they have a daughter, Danielle Riley, and then they have a son, Benjamin. Then they don't work out. She ends up moving on and having a different relationship, and then she eventually will have 2 more children. She has twin girls, okay? So in all, she has 4 children. Her son, Benjamin, and I will say, to me, Lisa Marie definitely favors her dad. Like, there was a remarkable resemblance. Her resemblance most definitely passed on to her son, Benjamin, going by Ben. Now, he very much was also, these are famous grandchildren of Elvis. And so everybody's, scrutinized and put in the papers and such. But Benjamin definitely looked like Elvis. He very much had his face. But Benjamin faced a lot of troubles. And in 2020, at the age of 27, he dies by suicide on July 12th. He died, he had a self-inflicted gunshot. They do an autopsy, had a history of depression, a history of alcohol and cocaine abuse, and evidently alcohol and cocaine were found in his system at the time of his death. He had troubles, and this happened. This was absolutely devastating for Lisa Marie. She loses her son to this situation. And Benjamin is also buried at Graceland. So he is there along with his grandfather and his great grandparents and then his great great grandparents. So in 2020, Lisa Marie has this horrendous, horrible loss. Okay. It was absolutely devastating for her. Now, fast forward, we talked about the biopics that were going on. You have the big Elvis biopic that came out in like 2023. So Lisa and Priscilla were really instrumental in the making of these films, okay? These biopic films were involved, and the films were great. Now Lisa Marie is invited to the premiere. So this is coming out in 2023, and she goes to this premiere, and this is in January. This is like around January 10th or so. So she goes to this premiere, and it's reported afterwards of just how sickly she looked. Like, she was kind of being held up. She looks weak. She looks sick. She's only 54 years old. They're reporting on this. And then right after this, on January 12th, evidently that morning, she had been suffering from abdominal pain, and this was kind of a thing. Actually, her ex-husband, like Riley, her daughter, Danielle Riley, she goes by Riley Keough. She's an actress. Her dad, Danny, actually took Lisa Marie's twin girls to school. And when he comes back, he finds Lisa Marie unresponsive. And so he calls 911. They tell him to start doing CPR. Now they rush Lisa Marie to the hospital, find her with a severely distended abdomen, which was rigid. She had severe metabolic acidosis, and she was had an anoxic brain injury. And they tried to do a temporary pacemaker, I guess, to get her heart going, but she then went into cardiac arrest and could not be resuscitated. So they tried and tried. So she does pass away on January 12th. And this is an absolute shock. But this was coming off of all these reports from her red carpet appearance that she did not look well. Like, she just didn't look well. Fast forward, they do her autopsy and then pronounce that they did a toxicology report and such. They find that she had, this is going to be very familiar sounding, therapeutic, quote unquote, levels of oxycodone. She had an opioid buprenorphine in her system, and this was typically actually used to treat an opioid use disorder. So clearly she had, like her father had, kind of this polypharmacy, not really polypharmacy going on like he did, but she obviously had had a trouble with opioids. And we do know that the opioids cause this constipation, and basically she had a bowel obstruction, and it said that she also had like a weight loss surgery, so she did have a bowel obstruction caused her. So this is very similar, very horrible. And again, she's 54. Her dad was much younger at 42, but wow. I mean, this is just really sad situation where it's very much going in that direction as her father. It's like she just couldn't break that cycle, although she clearly was trying to get out of that addiction with the opioids by taking this other drug, so to speak, to treat her situation. And of course, she would have gone through this horrible loss, the loss of her child in 2020. So just another tragedy. And of course, Lisa Marie is obviously buried at Graceland. So they're all in the meditation garden. Of course, to this day, you can go and see Elvis, Minnie, Gladys, Vernon, Lisa Marie, and Benjamin. So they're all there. And it's just crazy. It's weird to think that she passed in her 50s. That horrible event was in 2023. Well, Graceland, actually, kind of a weird thing happened. And I remember a couple years ago, this kind of came out that Graceland was going to be up for auction. That didn't happen. But anyway, a long story short, this woman had basically come forward and said that Lisa Marie had borrowed money and leveraged Graceland. And come to find out, this woman was a fraudster. She had fraudulent paperwork. So this woman's name was Lisa as well, but her name was Lisa Finley. She was from Missouri, but basically she had formed fraudulent documents and was trying to make it seem that Lisa Marie owed her money and Graceland was the collateral, which wasn't true, but I know it scared me when I heard that Graceland might sell or that something was going to happen to Graceland. But they settled it all. This woman is in trouble, obviously, for fraud. But Lisa Marie, there was more legal battles going within the family when Lisa Marie passed. So Lisa Marie obviously is the owner of Graceland, but when she passed away, she hadn't written up an addendum to her will. It wasn't legal, but it was definitely her handwriting, definitely her. But she basically put control and ownership of Graceland to her daughter Riley, who is her oldest child. So after this happens, of course, Priscilla, who's been executor over the estate, goodness, since Vernon's death, is now not. Well, she goes ahead and sues Riley, and it's said, of course, the press, because of this, it's said that there's a big feud and that Priscilla wanted to be buried at Graceland. That was what was said in the press. But Riley and Priscilla both kind of told the press, no, there's not a feud. Evidently, Priscilla just wanted to make sure that certain items in the trust were protected, and that she just wanted, she had control all that time, and from what I could read, that there were certain guidelines that she wanted to instill and make sure that the trust abided by to protect the assets and to protect Graceland for future. Now they end up settling, but in the ultimate, I should say, and the ultimate bottom line is that Riley Keough is now the official owner of Graceland. So it's still, just like Vernon had said from the very beginning, Graceland is still in the family. And that, I think, is a beautiful thing. And I pray that that continues. Now, and it looks like Riley herself has 2 children. So I don't know her plan as far as if anything happens to her, if she is going to just pass Graceland on to her twin sisters, or what is going to happen. It is very interesting. With all that being said, episode is really interesting to me. And again, the biggest thing was like, why did people believe that Elvis just wasn't dead? And again, I do believe that he was just beloved. He was absolutely beloved. And I think it said a lot about him that literally upon their divorce, him and Priscilla, he kissed her goodbye. They walked out hand in hand. It was said years later when he passed, his ex-girlfriend Linda, it said that when she found out about his passing, that she was incredibly sad. She came to his funeral. She always had really fond memories and feelings for him. He took care of the people in his life. He really did. And I think that that exuded from him. And I think that's what made him a superstar to begin with. Like his humbleness, his niceness, his just him wanting to be treated like a normal person when he was in service, and everything about him made him that superstar, but it made him that incredible legend from still to this day. I mean, we're talking 50 years ago, he passed, I should say next year, and we still love Elvis. We still love Graceland. We still want to see where he lived and see his belonging. Now, Priscilla herself, obviously, she is still alive. She is 81 years old. That's amazing. She has said herself that it has been frustrating for people to talk about Elvis and talk about how he is all the conspiracies, and her feelings on it where she just wanted people to remember Elvis, to remember all of the wonderful things about him and not think about him in death at all. But she totally dispelled any of the conspiracy theorists. And again, I really do think that people do. They love him, they treasure his legacy, and he does live on through his music, his museum, his grandchildren and great grandchildren. And yeah, it is a beautiful thing. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed this Elvis journey with me. I really have. And yeah, so just FYI, this is coming out. You will get this episode before my live show, but if you are in the central Arkansas area or Arkansas area, definitely show up for the live show. Just come, you can pay at the door. It's going to be such a fun time. And then next week, I guess I should say, there might be a lapse in episodes, but the next episode is going to be over the ghost, quote unquote, of the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. So I've kind of been talking about that. It's going to be a really fun episode, but there is a lot of episodes coming up. So stay tuned. Thank you so much for listening, and bye. This is a PS. So just a PS. Originally, there were only allotted like 6 graves on Graceland whenever they went to get the zoning change back in 77. But it is said that an unlimited amount, I guess they have to ask permission, but currently all 6 of those permissible in 77 are filled. But Riley Keough did say that she did want Priscilla buried at Graceland if that was Priscilla's want as well. So that was in the news that she would be buried there. So I guess we all will find out what happens with the meditation garden in the future.